No employee could stand the businessman's wife, until one surprised everyone. Jessica Miller watched the orange juice drip down her boss's face while holding the empty glass in her hand, showing no remorse. She was the 20th employee in 6 months, but for the first time someone had fought back against Catherine Wilson's constant humiliations. The businessman Thomas Wilson, frozen in the doorway of his Beverly Hills mansion, braced for the usual outburst. His wife would typically scream, threaten to call security and fire any employee who dared challenge her on the spot. But this time, Catherine just smiled and said calmly, "Finally, someone with courage." Jessica realized something was very wrong with that unexpected reaction. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Wilson, I didn't mean to," Jessica began, confused. "Don't apologize," Catherine replied, wiping her face with a napkin. "It's been a long time since anyone had the courage to stand up to me." Thomas remained still, watching the surreal scene. In 15 years of marriage, he had never seen his wife react like this. Catherine was known in the neighborhood for her harshness with employees. The neighbors gossiped in beauty salons about how she turned the lives of her maids into a living nightmare. "Are you going to fire me?" Jessica asked, still holding the glass. "On the contrary, I want you to stay." "Make lunch as we planned," Catherine said, before leaving the room without further explanation. Jessica was left alone with Thomas, who finally reacted. "She never acts like this," he murmured, more to himself. "Something's going on." In the days that followed, Jessica began noticing strange patterns in Catherine's behavior. The boss assigned impossible tasks and criticized every detail, but now it seemed like she was testing something specific. While cleaning the attic, Jessica found a box of old notebooks. Inside were detailed notes about each previous employee. Sarah Johnson, weakness, sick daughter, exploit her need for money. Rachel Thompson, too proud, humiliate her in public to break her resistance. Kelly Williams, afraid of losing her job, increase pressure gradually. Catherine had kept an obsessive record of each maid's weaknesses to exploit them methodically. Jessica felt a chill in her stomach reading those words, but she kept searching, sensing there was more. At the bottom of the box, she found an old photo. A young woman, about 20, with features strikingly similar to Catherine's but with a genuine smile Jessica had never seen on her boss. On the back, a date from 20 years ago and the name Emily. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. Jessica pocketed the photo and went downstairs to the kitchen. Catherine was there making tea. "Find anything interesting in the attic?" Catherine asked without looking up. "Just dust and old boxes," Jessica lied. "Really?" Catherine finally met her eyes. "You're not like any of the other employees who've worked here." "What do you mean, ma'am?" "There's something about your reactions, a familiarity that bothers me." Jessica pretended not to understand, but her heart raced. There was something in the way Catherine watched her that suggested more than just a boss's curiosity. That night, Jessica heard muffled sobs coming from Catherine's room. She discreetly investigated, and through the door crack saw her boss holding the same photo she'd found in the attic, crying silently. "Emily, forgive me," Catherine whispered. "I didn't know how to find you." Jessica stepped back quietly. Emily. That name echoed strangely in her mind, like a distant melody she couldn't quite place. The next day, during an argument about polishing the silverware, Jessica decided to confront Catherine about the notebooks. "Why do you do this to the staff?" she asked directly. Catherine stopped polishing the glass in her hands. "Do what?" "Write down their weaknesses. Plan how to hurt them." A heavy silence fell between them. Catherine slammed the glass onto the table too hard, making a loud noise. "You know nothing about my life," Catherine said, but her voice trembled. "Then explain it to me. Who is Emily?" The question triggered an unexpected breakdown. Catherine collapsed into a chair, covering her face with her hands. Thomas, who had just returned from work, walked into the kitchen and was alarmed. "What happened here?" he asked, rushing to his wife. She asked about Emily," Catherine sobbed. Thomas looked confusedly at Jessica, then at his wife. Who is Emily, honey? You've never mentioned any Emily to me. Catherine lifted her face, her eyes red, with the expression of someone carrying a burden for years. My twin sister, she said, almost whispering. Who disappeared 20 years ago? The revelation hit like a bomb. Thomas stepped back, shocked. You have a twin sister. How could you never tell me this in 15 years of marriage? Jessica remained quiet, but her mind raced. Twin sister. The familiar features she'd seen in the photo, the strange feeling she'd had since her first day in that house. Because it hurts too much to talk about it, Catherine replied. We fought over our father's inheritance. I said terrible things. She left home and never came back. And what does that have to do with the staff? Jessica asked, though she was already starting to suspect the answer. Catherine stared at her with still teary eyes. Because ever since then I've looked for signs of her in every young woman who enters this house. I test them to see if they'd react the way she would, if they'd have the courage she always had to stand up to me. The confession hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Thomas ran a hand through his hair, trying to process everything. Catherine, this is obsession, he said. You've tormented all these women over a fantasy. It's not a fantasy, Catherine shouted. She's out there somewhere, and maybe, just maybe, she's come back to look for me too. Jessica felt her legs weaken. She needed to sit down. Catherine's words echoed in her mind, mixing with fragmented memories of her own childhood, memories of an adoptive mother who always avoided talking about her past. I need air, Jessica said, quickly leaving the kitchen. Outside in the mansion's garden, she tried to gather her thoughts. She had been born in 1985, the same year listed in the photo. Her adoptive mother, Margaret, had always been vague about how she'd come into the family. She would only say, there were problems with the biological family, and change the subject. Besides, Jessica had always felt different. She had a heart-shaped birthmark on her left shoulder, and Margaret would often say, your twin sister would have the same mark. She had never understood what that meant. When she went back inside, Catherine and Thomas were still arguing in the living room. You need professional help, Thomas said. What you've done to these women is sick. I know it sounds crazy, Catherine replied, but you don't understand the weight I carry. The guilt of losing my other half because of pride. Jessica stood in the doorway watching. Catherine looked smaller, more fragile than at any moment since Jessica had started working there. Mrs. Wilson, she said, getting their attention. May I ask you a personal question? Catherine nodded. Did your sister have any special mark? Something only the two of you shared? Catherine's face lit up with hope. Yes, a birthmark on the left shoulder, shaped like a heart. Why do you ask? Jessica felt the world spin. Instinctively, she brought her hand to her own left shoulder, where she knew her identical mark was. Because, she began, but stopped. She couldn't reveal it so abruptly. She needed certainty. Because maybe I can help you find your sister. Catherine's eyes filled with tears again, but this time with hope. You'd do that? Yes, but first, I need to know more about what happened. The whole truth. Catherine looked at Thomas, who nodded encouragingly. All right, sit down. I'll tell you everything. And so, in the living room of the Beverly Hills mansion, Catherine began to tell a story that would change the lives of everyone present. Emily and I were born in 1965 in the garment district, Catherine began. Our parents had a small but successful clothing business. We were always very close, like two halves of one person. Jessica noticed the discrepancy in the date. If Catherine had been born in 1965, she'd be 60 now. But the young woman in the photo looked about 20, and the date on the back was from 20 years ago, 2005. That would mean Catherine was 40 in the photo, not 20. Something didn't add up. As we grew up, Catherine continued, our father expanded the business. He bought properties, invested in other companies. Emily was always the rebellious one, questioning his decisions. I was more obedient, trying to keep the peace. And what exactly happened during the fight? Thomas asked. Catherine hesitated as if revisiting a painful moment. Our father decided to leave everything to me in his will. He said I was more responsible, that Emily was too impulsive. When she found out, she was furious. Said I'd manipulated Dad against her. Was it true? Jessica asked, watching Catherine's reaction closely. I might have agreed with Dad when he expressed concerns about Emily, but I never asked to be the sole heir. Her tone suggested there were more details being left out. Jessica made a mental note to look into that later. Emily said I'd stolen not just her inheritance, but also her identity, Catherine went on, that I'd always been the perfect daughter at her expense. We fought terribly. I said, she paused, clearly struggling with the words. What did you say? Thomas gently pressed. I said she'd always been the problem in the family, that maybe it was better if she left. At least then we'd have peace. The silence hung heavy again. Jessica could imagine the pain those words must have caused a twin sister. And she left that same night, Catherine concluded. Took just one suitcase and disappeared. Dad died 6 months later, and Mom never recovered from losing both daughters. Both daughters? Jessica asked. Because I lost myself too when Emily left. I spent years trying to find her, hired detectives, placed ads in newspapers. Nothing. It's like she just ceased to exist. Thomas took his wife's hand. Why didn't you ever tell me? We could have searched together. Because I was ashamed of what I did, what I said, and also because... She looked at Jessica. Because I developed this unhealthy obsession with looking for her in every woman who came into my life. Jessica felt a tightness in her chest. The story touched on very specific points of her own life. Margaret always said she'd been saved from a difficult situation when she was 20, and she always insisted Jessica had a heart sister somewhere, though she never explained what that meant. Can I see the photo again? Jessica asked. Catherine went to fetch the photo from the attic and handed it to her. Jessica studied it carefully. The young woman in the photo really did look a lot like her, but there was something more. The eyes, the shape of the face, even the way she smiled. Where exactly did you live in the garment district? She asked. 847 Fashion Avenue. Why? Jessica nearly dropped the photo. Mrs. Margaret used to take her for walks in the garment district when she was a child, and they always stopped in front of 847 Fashion Avenue. She said it was an important place for the family's history. And your sister's full name? Emily Wilson Baker, but she might have changed it. When she found out I'd gotten married and became Catherine Wilson, maybe she decided to keep just Baker. Wilson Baker. Jessica's last name was Baker. The coincidences were piling up in a staggering way. I need to leave early today, Jessica said, standing up. There's something I need to check. Of course, Catherine replied. And Jessica, thank you for listening without judging me. On the bus ride home, Jessica turned the thoughts over in her mind. Everything pointed to a possibility she barely dared to consider. But she needed concrete proof before making any decisions. Her home was in Park Slope, a small studio she shared with Mrs. Margaret, her 78-year-old adoptive mother. When she arrived, she found her watching the evening soap opera. You're home early today, dear, Mrs. Margaret said. I need to talk to you about something important, Jessica said, turning off the TV. What is it? Did something happen at work? Jessica sat beside the woman who had raised her with so much love. Mrs. Margaret, I need the truth about my biological family. The elderly woman's face changed instantly. Her smile vanished, replaced by an expression of worry. Why are you asking this now, dear? Because I think I've found my twin sister. Mrs. Margaret brought a hand to her chest, clearly shaken. What do you mean? Where? It's my boss, and she's been looking for me for 20 years. Silence stretched between them. Mrs. Margaret struggled to her feet and went to the bedroom. She returned with a small box Jessica had never seen before. Sit down, child. It's time you knew the whole truth. Jessica obeyed, sensing her life was about to change forever. Your birth name wasn't Jessica Baker, Mrs. Margaret began. It was Emily Wilson Baker. The words hit Jessica like a punch. Emily. She was Emily. In 2005, you showed up at my door in the middle of the night, crying, with just one suitcase and a bag of documents. You said you'd fought with your family and had nowhere else to go. But why don't I remember any of this clearly? Because you were in severe emotional shock. The doctor who treated you said it was common in cases of family trauma. Your memories became fragmented. Mrs. Margaret opened the box and pulled out an old ID card. The name read Emily Wilson Baker, and the photo was of a 20-year-old who was undeniably Jessica. You asked me to call you by another name. You said you didn't want to be Emily anymore. You chose Jessica, and I allowed it because I thought it would help you heal. Jessica held the document with trembling hands. 20 years of her life had been a well-intentioned lie. I remember fragments, she murmured. A big house, arguments, someone yelling at me. You used to talk in your sleep at first. You always apologized to someone named Catherine. You said you didn't mean to leave. Tears began streaming down Jessica's face, or Emily's. She didn't even know who she was anymore. Why didn't you ever tell me this before? Because you seemed happy being Jessica, and I was afraid that if you knew the truth, you'd leave too. You became the daughter I never had. Jessica hugged Mrs. Margaret, understanding the woman's dilemma. And now, Mrs. Margaret asked, will you tell your sister? I don't know. She spent 20 years looking for me, but she also spent 20 years hurting other women because of me. How can I forgive that? Sometimes people do terrible things when they're in pain, dear. It doesn't excuse it, but it explains it. That night, Jessica barely slept. She stared at the old ID card, trying to reconnect the fragments of her memory. She vaguely remembered a terrible argument, words that cut deep, a feeling of complete rejection. But she also remembered good times, playing in a big garden, two identical girls creating imaginary worlds, total companionship. The pain of separation had erased so much, but the love was still there, buried under layers of hurt. The next day she returned to work determined to look at Catherine with fresh eyes, her twin sister. The words still sounded strange, yet true. Catherine was in the kitchen making breakfast. She looked like she'd slept poorly, with dark circles under her eyes. Good morning, Jessica, she said. I thought a lot about our conversation yesterday. So did I. I think I need to stop looking for Emily. It's an obsession that's destroying my life and other people's lives. Jessica set her purse on the counter and stared at her. What if I told you that you don't have to stop looking, that maybe she's closer than you think? Catherine looked at her, confused. What do you mean? I mean, sometimes the people we're searching for are right in front of us, but we don't recognize them because they've changed. Jessica, you're speaking in riddles. That's when Jessica made her decision. She pulled the old ID card from her purse and placed it on the table. Catherine looked at the document and paled. She picked it up with trembling hands and read the name over and over. Emily Wilson Baker, she whispered. This is... How did you... Because it's me. I'm Emily. The glass Catherine was holding slipped from her hands and shattered on the floor. The two stood frozen, staring at each other as 20 years of separation seemed to dissolve in the air. It can't be, Catherine said, her voice choked. You've been working for me for 2 weeks. If you were Emily... I didn't know. I lost most of my memory when I left. A kind woman took me in and gave me a new name. I only found out the truth yesterday. Catherine stepped closer slowly, as if approaching a wounded animal. Let me see your shoulder, she asked. Jessica moved her blouse aside slightly, revealing the heart-shaped birthmark. Catherine did the same, showing an identical mark. And then they embraced. A hug filled with 20 years of longing, guilt, regret, and love, never forgotten. Both of them wept uncontrollably. I'm so sorry, Catherine sobbed. I'm sorry for everything I said, for everything I did afterward. I'm sorry too for leaving without trying to fix things, Jessica replied. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing, they stayed like that for long minutes, reclaiming a bond that had seemed lost forever. When they finally pulled apart, Catherine cupped Jessica's face in her hands. You're different, more mature, more composed. The Emily I knew was more explosive. 20 years changed a lot in me, and in you too, I imagine. Catherine nodded. I'm not that proud girl who let you walk away anymore, though. She hesitated. I suppose you've already noticed I've developed some issues. The way you treat the staff. Yes, it was my twisted way of trying to find you. I tested each of them, looking for reactions that reminded me of my brave sister. Jessica took Catherine's hands. We have so much to talk about. There's so much we don't know about each other. But first, you need to help me understand what really happened to our family. Of course. But there's one thing I need to say first. Thomas doesn't know that you were Emily. How are we going to explain this? Before Jessica could answer, Thomas appeared in the kitchen. Good morning, girls. Wow, what's with the faces? Did something happen? Catherine and Jessica looked at each other. It was time for the day's second revelation. Thomas, said Catherine, holding Jessica's hand, I need to introduce you to someone. This is Emily, my twin sister. Thomas stopped in his tracks, processing the information. What do you mean? Jessica is... Yes, she's Emily. She's been right here all along and we didn't know. Thomas leaned against the counter, clearly confused. How is this possible? She's been working here for 2 weeks. If she were your sister... Jessica quickly explained the memory loss and the name change. Thomas listened with an increasingly bewildered expression. So you've been searching for your sister for 20 years, he said to Catherine, torturing dozens of women in the process, and she was right here. It wasn't like that, Jessica defended. She didn't know, neither did I. But it's a cruel irony, isn't it? Thomas ran a hand through his hair. All those women who suffered because my wife was looking for someone who only showed up when she decided to confront her. The comment created an uncomfortable silence. Jessica realized Thomas was right. In a way, all those employees had paid the price for Catherine's obsession. You're right, said Catherine, and that's something I'll have to live with for the rest of my life. But now I can try to make amends with some of those women. How? Asked Thomas. I don't know yet, but I need to try to undo the harm I've done. Jessica admired her sister's attitude. It was a first step toward redemption. First, let's settle our family matter, said Jessica. Then we'll think about the rest. You're right, Thomas. Can we take the day off? Emily and I have a lot to talk about. Of course, I'll work from home today. Take your time. After Thomas retreated to the office, the sisters sat in the living room. Where do we start? Asked Catherine. From the beginning. The real story about the inheritance. Catherine sighed. The real story is more complicated than what I told you yesterday. Dad really wanted to leave everything to me, but not just because he thought you were irresponsible. Then why? Because I went to him and asked. I told him you were only interested in spending money and that I'd take better care of the business. The confession hit Jessica like a slap. Catherine had actively conspired to keep the inheritance. You did that on purpose? Yes. And I've regretted it every day since. I was young, ambitious, and thought I deserved more, because I was always the good one in the family. Jessica stood and walked to the window. Anger swelled in her chest, mixed with pain. So everything you said yesterday about not asking to be the sole heir was a lie? It wasn't a complete lie. I didn't ask to be the only one. I asked for the majority. I never imagined Dad would cut you out completely. But you did nothing to stop him when he did. No. And that's my biggest regret. Jessica turned to face her sister. Do you know what the worst part of our fight was that day? It wasn't finding out about the inheritance. It was realizing my own twin sister had conspired against me. Catherine began to cry again. I know, and I understand if you can't forgive me. It's not about forgiving, it's about trust. How can I trust someone who betrayed me so deeply? You can't, not yet, but maybe with time I can prove I've changed. Jessica sat back down but kept her distance from Catherine. Tell me what happened after I left. Dad died 6 months later. Heart problems. But I think it was mostly guilt over losing you. He deeply regretted his decision. And Mom? Mom was inconsolable. She tried to convince me to look for you, but my pride was too wounded. I thought if you wanted to come back, you'd do it on your own. And her? She died 3 years later. Deep depression. She never recovered from losing both daughters around the same time. The information about her mother hit Jessica hard. Mrs. Elizabeth had always been the family mediator, the one who tried to keep everyone together. "She died thinking I had abandoned her," Jessica said, her voice trembling. "No, she died waiting for you to come back. She always said one day your girls would find each other again. And yet you never looked for me." "I did. I spent a fortune on private investigators. But you'd changed your name, moved far away. It was like you'd vanished off the face of the earth." Jessica thought of Mrs. Margaret, who had carefully protected her new identity. "I was in Park Slope the whole time, less than an hour from here. I know, it's ironic. If I'd searched in simpler neighborhoods, maybe I would have found you years ago. But you only looked in appropriate places, didn't you? Places that fit your idea of where a Wilson should be." Catherine lowered her head, acknowledging the criticism. "You're right. My prejudice got in the way too." They sat in silence for a few minutes, each processing the revelations. "Catherine," Jessica finally said, "I need time to take all this in. My memories resurfacing, learning you conspired against me, understanding how our family fell apart." "I understand. How much time do you need?" "I don't know, but I can't keep working here as a maid. It would be too strange." "Of course. You'll never have to work as a maid again, for that matter. Half of everything I inherited is rightfully yours. I don't want your money, Catherine. It's not my money, it's our money, our family's." Jessica shook her head. 20 years have passed. You built your life, your business. I won't just show up and take half of everything. But it's fair. No, you know what would be fair. Me having the chance to build my own life with my own inheritance. That's something I can't get back. The conversation was growing tense again. Jessica realized there was still so much hurt to process. "I think I should leave for today," she said, standing up. "Emily, Jessica, what should I call you?" "I don't know yet. I need to figure out who I am now that I know where I come from." "Will you come back?" "I will, but not as an employee, and I don't know when." Jessica gathered her things and headed for the door. Before leaving, she turned one last time. "Catherine, I want to try to rebuild our relationship, but it won't be easy, and it won't be quick. You hurt a lot of people, including me. I know, and I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. Then start by finding the employees you fired and apologizing to them. That would be a good first step." On the bus ride home, Jessica reflected on the surreal morning she'd just lived through. In just a few hours, her entire life had changed. She'd regained her identity, found her family, but also uncovered betrayals that cut deep. Mrs. Margaret was waiting anxiously for her. "So, dear, how did it go?" Jessica told her everything that had happened. Mrs. Margaret listened carefully, offering occasional comments. "And now, what will you do?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to forgive Catherine and try to rebuild our relationship, but another part is so angry with her. That's normal, dear. 20 years is a long time. You're different people now. Do you think I should give her a chance?" "I think you should give yourself a chance to find out if you can live with your sister, knowing everything she did. And if I can't, then at least you tried, and you can move on in peace, knowing you did your part." That night, Jessica tried to sort through her memories. Now that she knew who she was, some recollections were coming back more clearly. She remembered childhood with Catherine, their games, their bond, but she also remembered the constant competition their parents created between them. "Look how organized Catherine is, Emily. Why can't you be more like your sister?" "Emily is so brave, Catherine. You could learn from her to be more decisive." Their parents constantly compared them, fostering a rivalry that may have culminated in the betrayal over the inheritance. The next morning, Jessica received a call from Catherine. "Emily, can I call you Emily?" "You may. I think it's time I reclaim my real name again." "Emily, I thought a lot last night. I want to start repairing the damage I've caused. Could you help me find the employees I fired?" "Why?" "Because I want to apologize to each of them in person, and if possible, offer some compensation." The gesture surprised Emily in a good way. "That would be a good start. I can try to help, yes? Thank you. And Emily, I was thinking, how about we have dinner together tomorrow? Somewhere neutral so we can talk calmly. Emily hesitated. Was she ready for this? All right, but in a public place. Of course. How about that Italian restaurant in Park Slope, close to your home? Fine. 8 o'clock. After hanging up, Emily realized she had taken the first step toward rebuilding her relationship with her sister. It was frightening, but also exciting. In the following days, she dedicated herself to researching the former employees of the Wilson family. Using her memories from when she worked there, she managed to locate a few of them. Sarah Johnson was still unemployed, struggling with her sick daughter. Rachel Thompson had found another job, but under much worse conditions. Kelly Williams was doing odd cleaning jobs to survive. Emily wrote down each one's contact information and addresses. It was a painful list of lives affected by her sister's obsession. On the evening of their dinner, Emily arrived at the restaurant a few minutes late. Catherine was already there, clearly nervous. "I thought you weren't coming," Catherine said as Emily sat down. "I considered not coming at all, but I decided we should at least try." The dinner began with small talk about the menu and the restaurant's atmosphere. Both were avoiding heavier topics. "Emily," Catherine finally said, "I brought some things you might want to see." She pulled a small box from her bag. "What is it?" "Some memories from our childhood. Photos, letters, things you left in your room when you moved out." Emily opened the box carefully. Inside was a photo of the two of them at 10 years old, hugging and smiling. A letter she had written to Catherine at 12, thanking her for lending her a doll, a small pendant they used to share. "You kept all this?" "I did. I always thought I'd return it to you someday." Emily held the photo, feeling a wave of nostalgia. "We were so close. We were, and I ruined it all with greed and pride. It wasn't just you. I could have stayed and fought for my rights instead of running away. You were hurt. It was natural to want distance." They ate in silence for a few minutes, each lost in their own memories. "Catherine, I need to ask you something difficult," Emily said. "Go ahead. Do you regret what you did because it was wrong, or because you found out it was me?" The question caught Catherine off guard. She chewed slowly, thinking, "Both. I felt guilty for years about how I treated the employees, but finding out it was you made it 1,000 times worse." "So you admit what you did was wrong, regardless of whether I was involved?" "Yes. And I want to change that. I've already started reaching out to some of the women I fired." "How's it going?" "Hard. Some don't even want to talk to me. Others are still deeply hurt. But a few agreed to meet." Emily nodded, approving of the effort. "And Thomas? How is he handling all this?" Catherine sighed. "He's having trouble processing it. Not just the fact that you're my sister, but everything he's learned about my behavior. He always knew I was demanding with the staff, but he didn't know the details." "Are you two okay?" "We're in couples therapy. There's a lot to talk about. I'm glad you're getting professional help." "And you? Are you in therapy too? It must be a lot to process." "I started this week. I need to better understand my own identity now that I know where I come from." The dinner continued more naturally. They shared childhood memories, talked about their lives over the past 20 years, and tried to understand how two people who had once been so close had become strangers. "Emily," Catherine said as they were finishing dessert, "I want you to know I have no expectations about our relationship. I know I hurt you deeply, and I know it may take a long time for you to trust me again, if ever. I don't know what to expect either, but I want to try. For our mother, for our history, for ourselves. We can take it slow then. Dinners like this, maybe some walks. No pressure." "I agree." When they said goodbye at the restaurant door, they hugged briefly. It was still a hesitant hug, but genuine. In the following days, Emily started receiving calls from Catherine about her progress with the former employees. Sarah Johnson had accepted financial compensation and a letter of recommendation for a new job. Rachel Thompson initially refused any contact, but later agreed to receive an apology letter. Kelly Williams accepted a face-to-face meeting with Catherine. "How was the meeting with Kelly?" Emily asked during a walk in the park. "Hard. She was very upset and she had every right to be, but in the end, I think she understood my remorse is sincere. And you? How did you feel? Terrible. Seeing the real impact of what I did on her life, it was devastating. But also necessary. Emily admired Catherine's effort to make amends. It was a painful but important process. There's something I want to tell you, Catherine said. I found our mother. Emily stopped walking abruptly. What do you mean? You said she didn't die. She's been in a nursing home for 10 years. Advanced dementia. The revelation hit Emily like lightning. Her mother was alive. Why did you lie about it? Because it's too painful. She hasn't recognized anyone in years. It's like she's already gone, but her body is still here. Where is she? In a nursing home in Hartford. She gets the best care, but I want to see her. Emily, she won't recognize you. It could be very traumatic. It doesn't matter. She's my mother. I need to see her. Catherine nodded in understanding. Okay, we can go together this weekend. The nursing home was well kept, but it still had that distinct medical facility smell that made Emily uneasy. Mrs. Elizabeth was sitting in an armchair by the window, gazing at the garden with a vacant expression. At 85, she still carried traces of the beauty Emily remembered, but her eyes were empty, lost somewhere only she knew. Mom, Catherine said, sitting beside her, I brought someone to meet you. Mrs. Elizabeth looked at Catherine without recognition, then turned her eyes to Emily. For a moment, there seemed to be a flicker of familiarity in her gaze. Emily? Mrs. Elizabeth whispered, surprising both daughters. Emily knelt beside the chair, holding her mother's hands. Yes, Mom. It's me, Emily. Where have you been, sweetheart? I've been waiting for you so long. Tears streamed down Emily's face. Apparently, even with dementia, a part of Mrs. Elizabeth still remembered her. I was far away, Mom, but I came back. Your sister was sad when you left. She looked for you, you know. Emily looked at Catherine, who was also crying. I know, Mom. And now we've found each other again. Mrs. Elizabeth smiled, a fragile but genuine smile. That's good. I always knew you'd find each other. You're parts of the same soul. They stayed there for 2 hours, talking with Mrs. Elizabeth. The elderly woman had moments of clarity mixed with confusion, but the whole time she seemed happy to have both her daughters there. When they left the nursing home, both were emotionally drained. She recognized you, Catherine said in the car. In 10 years, she never recognized anyone, but she recognized you. Maybe it's the bond between mother and daughter, stronger than the illness. Or maybe she waited for you so long that not even dementia could erase her memory. The visit to their mother marked a turning point in the sisters' relationship. They began meeting more often, always in public places, always talking about the past and trying to build a foundation for the future. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Emily also started visiting the house in Beverly Hills occasionally, but always as a guest, never again as an employee. Thomas was polite, but he was still processing everything. It's strange, he said during lunch, having spent 2 weeks with you thinking you were one person, and now finding out you're someone completely different. I understand, it's strange for me too. You were the first people I met as Emily in 20 years. How do you feel about that? Being Emily again? Confused sometimes. Jessica was who I became to survive. Emily is who I always was inside. I'm trying to merge the two. Therapy was helping Emily navigate these identity issues. Little by little, she was recovering clearer memories of her life before 20. One of those memories came during a particularly intense session. She remembered the exact night she left home 20 years ago. The fight had been worse than Catherine had described. After discovering the inheritance conspiracy, Emily had confronted not just Catherine, but also their father. He had coldly admitted that he considered Catherine more suited to manage the family business. You were always too emotional, Emily. Too impulsive. You don't have the temperament for serious responsibilities. Those words had hurt more than anything Catherine could have said. Their father's rejection had been the final blow. Emily decided to share this memory with Catherine during one of their meetings. So Dad really said that? Catherine asked, shocked. He did, and deep down I think you agreed with him. I didn't. I always admired your courage, your spontaneity. That's why I was jealous of you. Jealous? Of course. You did things I'd never have the courage to do. You spoke your mind, stood by your opinions. I was always the rule follower, the one who never made trouble. But you were free in a way I envied. This confession revealed a new layer of complexity in their relationship. It wasn't just about greed. It was also about insecurity and mutual envy. If you envied me, why conspire against me? Because I thought if I could win our parents' full approval, maybe I'd feel as secure as you seemed. I never felt secure, Catherine. I always felt like I had to prove my worth. That's why I was so combative. They were discovering that many of their childhood perceptions had been distorted by time and emotions. You know what's most ironic? Emily said. Over these 20 years, I became exactly what Dad said I should be, more controlled, more cautious, and you seem to have developed some of my more impulsive traits. What do you mean? Your obsession with finding me, the way you treated the staff. Those were emotional reactions, not rational ones. Catherine reflected on this. You're right. It's like we've switched places in a way. Maybe that's why we didn't recognize each other right away. We weren't looking for the people we'd become, but for the people we used to be. This conversation marked another moment of growth in their relationship. They began to know each other as the people they were now, not just as the sisters they had once been. As the months passed, Emily began to feel more comfortable visiting the family home. Catherine had completely changed her behavior toward the staff. She hired a new housekeeper, Elizabeth, and treated her with respect and dignity. How do you feel seeing Catherine treat Elizabeth well? Asked Emily's therapist. Relieved. It proves she's really changed. But also a little sad thinking of all the women who suffered before she decided to change. Do you think you should carry the guilt for their suffering? Not rationally, but emotionally sometimes I feel that if I had come back sooner, or if I'd never left, they wouldn't have gone through that. But you're not responsible for the choices Catherine made in your absence. I know. But it's still hard not to feel some responsibility. This guilt was something Emily was working to overcome. Catherine, in turn, was dealing with her own guilt through concrete acts of reparation. Beyond financially compensating the former staff, she had set up a small fund to help vulnerable women find decent jobs. It was her way of turning her past destructive energy into something positive. I have a proposal for you, Catherine said during lunch. How about we work together on this social project? What do you mean? You could coordinate the women's training program. Your experience as a domestic worker, combined with your education, would be very valuable. Emily had mentioned that she'd completed high school during her years as Jessica and had taken some vocational courses. I'm not sure I'm ready to work directly with you. It wouldn't be direct. You'd have full autonomy. I'd just fund the project. The proposal was tempting. Emily had always been troubled by the social injustices she'd witnessed, and this would be a chance to do something about them. Let me think about it. After speaking with Margaret and her therapist, Emily decided to accept. It would be a way to channel her own journey of overcoming hardship to help other women. The project started small, serving 5 women at a time. Emily developed training courses not just in technical skills, but also in self-esteem and assertiveness. She wanted them to learn not only how to work, but how to value themselves and stand up for their rights. How are the first students doing? Catherine asked during a progress meeting. They're progressing well, but it's slow work. Many of them carry trauma from past jobs. Trauma like what I caused? Some, yes. Humiliation, devaluation, exploitation. Unfortunately, it's not unique to you. It makes me feel awful knowing I contributed to that broader problem. What matters is that now you're helping to change it. The project's success gave Emily a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. More than that, working with Catherine on this initiative was gradually strengthening the trust between them. It was no longer just about forgiving the past. It was about building something positive together in the present. During a visit to Mrs. Elizabeth, the two brought photos of the project to show their mother. Even with her dementia, she seemed to understand that her daughters were working together again. You're taking care of each other, Mrs. Elizabeth said during a moment of clarity. That's all I ever wanted. We're trying, Mom, Emily replied. And taking care of others too, Catherine added. That's good. Family should be about that, about caring and being cared for. After that visit, Emily made an important decision. Catherine, I want you to know I've forgiven you. They were walking in the nursing home garden when Emily made the declaration. Really? Yes. It doesn't mean I've forgotten what happened or that it doesn't hurt anymore. But holding on to resentment is only hurting me, and seeing the effort you've put into changing, I think you deserve another chance. Catherine stopped walking and turned to face her sister. That means so much to me, more than you can imagine. It means we can try to build a real sisterhood, not based on the past, but on who we are now. I'd love that. They hugged there in the garden, a different kind of embrace than before, no longer a reunion or a consolation, but one of mutual acceptance and hope for the future. The first Christmas they spent together in 20 years was special. Emily stayed over at the house in Beverly Hills, along with Thomas and Mrs. Margaret, whom Catherine had warmly invited. It's strange to think a year ago I didn't even know you existed, Thomas said during dinner. And I thought my family was just Mrs. Margaret, Emily added. Now we're all family, Catherine said. Chosen family, which can sometimes be stronger than blood. We're both, Emily said, blood and chosen, because we chose to accept each other despite everything. Mrs. Margaret, who had witnessed the entire reconciliation journey, watched with pride. You remind me of the story my grandmother used to tell about two sisters who got lost in a forest, she said. They separated trying to find their way out, but only succeeded when they reunited and walked together. Does that story have a happy ending? Thomas asked. It does, Emily replied, looking at Catherine. They discovered they were stronger together than they ever were apart. The new year brought new challenges and opportunities. The social project had grown so much it needed its own headquarters. Catherine suggested renovating their father's old garment factory, which had been closed for years. It would be symbolic, she said, turning the place where our family fell apart into a place where other families can rebuild. I like the idea, but only if we do it together. Shared decisions, shared responsibilities. Of course, we're partners now. The factory renovation brought them even closer. Working side by side, planning every detail, they began to develop the partnership they might have had from the start. You know what amazes me most, Emily said as they painted one of the rooms. What? How well we work together. Our differences complement each other instead of clashing. Maybe because we respect those differences now instead of trying to change them. Or maybe because we've grown up. Definitely. We were too young to handle the pressures our parents put on us. The center's grand opening took place in March, attended by all the women who had gone through the program, including several former employees of the Wilson family. Sarah Johnson gave a moving speech about second chances and forgiveness. Rachel Thompson had become one of the volunteer instructors. Kelly Williams brought her daughter, who was studying to be a lawyer. Seeing you all here today, said Catherine during her speech, women I've hurt directly or indirectly, now working with us to help other women, is the greatest gift I could receive. And for me, added Emily, being here with my sister, building something positive together, proves it's never too late to start over. After the opening celebration, the sisters found themselves alone in the center, admiring the result of months of hard work. Do you think our parents would be proud? Catherine asked. I think our mother would be. As for Dad, Emily hesitated. I think he'd be surprised. We turned out different than he expected. We did, and that's a good thing. They walked through the empty rooms, imagining how they would soon be filled, with women learning, growing, transforming. Catherine, can I tell you something I've never told anyone? Of course. All those years as Jessica, I always felt like I was playing a role, as if the real me was asleep somewhere. And now I feel like I've finally woken up, and it's not the old Emily nor the Jessica I became. It's a new version of me, one that carries everything I've lived through. I feel the same way, like I spent 20 years as a distorted version of myself, and only now am I discovering who I really am. Maybe that's what happens when we make peace with our past. We become free to be who we truly are. The Hart Sisters Training Center, named after the phrase Elizabeth always used, became a reference in the area. Within 2 years, it had trained over 100 women and had a waiting list. Emily had moved into her own apartment, but still visited Catherine and Margaret regularly. It was as if she had finally found balance between her biological family and her family of the heart. Her relationship with Thomas had also evolved. He had become not just a brother-in-law, but a true friend. His admiration for Catherine's transformation and the work the sisters were doing was evident. "You know you're inspiring others, right?" he said during a family dinner. "How so?" Emily asked. "Today, a client told me she heard your story and decided to forgive her own sister after 10 years of not speaking." "Really?" Catherine said, moved. "Really?" She said if 2 people who hurt each other as much as you 2 could reconcile, any family could. That revelation gave their journey a greater meaning. It wasn't just about them. It was about the power of forgiveness and second chances. 3 years after their reunion, Elizabeth passed away peacefully in her sleep. Emily and Catherine were by her side, holding her hands. Her last clear words had been, "My girls are together again. Now I can rest." The funeral was small, but meaningful. Alongside family, many women who had been through the center attended, paying tribute not just to Elizabeth but to the legacy of unity she had left in her daughters. "She always knew we'd find our way back to each other," Emily said during the service. "And she always believed we'd be better together," Catherine added. "I think she was right." After the funeral, they decided to create a special program at the Center for Mothers and Daughters in Conflict in honor of Elizabeth. It would help other families avoid the separation they had endured. "What should we call the program?" Catherine asked. "Heart Bridges," Emily suggested, "because that's what we built between us, a bridge over the years of separation." The program became one of the center's most sought after. Mothers and daughters, sisters, cousins, grandmothers and granddaughters came seeking help to mend conflicts that had once seemed impossible to overcome. Emily and Catherine shared their own story as an example that reconciliation was possible, even after years of hurt and resentment. During one of these sessions, a teenager asked, "But did you 2 ever fight again after you reunited?" Emily and Catherine looked at each other and smiled. "Of course we did," Catherine replied. "We're sisters, not saints." "But now we know how to fight in a healthy way," Emily added. "We express our feelings without trying to destroy each other. And we always remember our relationship is more important than any argument," Catherine concluded. It was true. They still had occasional disagreements about decisions at the center, about family, about life. But they had learned to resolve conflicts with dialogue and mutual respect. On the 5th anniversary of their reunion, they organized a special celebration at the center. All the women who had participated in the programs, former staff, family and friends were invited. Thomas gave a moving speech about transformation and forgiveness. Mrs. Margaret, now 83 but still sharp, spoke about the importance of never giving up on love. But the most special moment was when Emily and Catherine stepped together onto the makeshift stage. "5 years ago," Emily began, "I was a lost woman who didn't even know her real name. And I was a bitter woman," Catherine continued, "who hurt others because I was hurting inside. Today, we're sisters again," Emily said. "Not the sisters we were in childhood, but the sisters we chose to be as adults. And together, we've turned our pain into strength to help others," Catherine concluded. The audience applauded, moved. Many of those women knew both stories, the painful separation and the inspiring reconciliation. After the celebration, when they were alone cleaning up, Catherine made a confession. "Emily, there's something I never told you." "What?" "That morning, when you threw the orange juice at me, I wasn't just happy because someone had finally stood up to me." "Then why?" "Because for a second, when I saw you holding that empty glass with that defiant look, I had a flash of recognition. Like my heart knew it was you, even before my mind understood." Emily stopped sweeping and looked at her sister. "Really?" "Really, it was instinct. For 20 years, no employee had ever reacted exactly like you would. But you did." Maybe what they say about twins is true, that there's always a connection even when we don't consciously understand it. Maybe, or maybe it was fate giving us a second chance. Or maybe, Emily said, smiling, it's just sisterly love, which can survive anything. They finished cleaning in comfortable silence, each reflecting on the extraordinary journey they'd taken together. When they left the center that night, they walked side by side to the bus stop where Emily would catch her ride. It was a ritual they'd developed. They always said goodbye there, no matter how late it was. Same time tomorrow? Catherine asked. Always, Emily replied. As she waited for the bus, Emily thought about how her life had completely changed. From Jessica Miller, a housekeeper with no past, to Emily Wilson Baker, a social program coordinator with a rebuilt family. It hadn't been easy. There were moments of doubt, anger, and the urge to give up. But there were also moments of discovery, healing, and unexpected joy. The bus arrived and Emily waved at Catherine through the window. Her sister waved back with the same genuine smile she remembered from childhood. They were sisters again. Different, more mature, wiser, but sisters, and that was the greatest achievement of all. The end. And what about you, dear listener? What did you think of this story of reunion and forgiveness? Leave your thoughts in the comments and tell us, do you believe Emily and Catherine made the right decisions? Do you have a similar family reconciliation story to share? We'd love to read your experiences. Thank you so much for joining us on this heartfelt journey.